Hello and welcome. I'm Tanya, your host, and you are listening to a new interview in the series of The Amazing Autistic Woman. In this series, I interview women on the autism spectrum, showing our everyday life struggles, limitations, and problems, which are so invisible to most people. If you want to support me so I can make more of those videos and interviews, there's a GoFundMe link below where you can contribute. Your help will be very much appreciated because I really love and I'm very passionate about making those interviews and telling unique stories that every one of us has. And so has Lucy, whom I interviewed today. Hi, Lucy.
Hello, hi.
Lucy is in the UK. She's 51, married, and has two grown daughters. She had a career in data and she also works as a neurodiversity coach now. Welcome, Lucy, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Tanya, for talking to me today.
I'm very happy to have you here. So, you told me that when you got the diagnosis, that was like a light bulb moment for you. Could you please explain why?
Yeah, so I, as a child, I'd always sort of struggled with various things. Like my mother would say to me, "Oh, Lucy, reply. Like somebody said hi to you, reply to them and say, how are you? Good morning." And I would never respond to normal social clues like that. I also had problems with toilet training. With as communication, with social interaction. I struggled to make friends. And so I think it all kind of like made sense. And when my daughter was 19, she said, "I think I might be autistic." And we went through the conversation, and I thought, and she said, "Well, why didn't you get me diagnosed when I was younger?" And I said, "Well, because everything that you were talking about, like I had, and I've been okay. I've made a life. I've done what I needed to do. I got a job. I became independent, and so I just, even though I knew something was a little bit amiss, I didn't really think it would be a problem. Just like it wasn't really a problem with me. I had been diagnosed with dyspraxia or clumsy child syndrome, as it was known then. Um, and I'd sort of just kind of moved on from there, I guess. But then when I started tracing it back and I did some reading extensive reading, which I'll talk about in a minute, but I did extensive reading on the topic, and I thought, okay, it makes sense now. It makes sense why I struggled to make eye contact, why I find that really overwhelming and almost painful, why I can connect with people, but I find it really hard to make long-term friendships and keep friendships. Um, why I had some problems developmentally, why I was really, really good at some things like maths, but I wasn't very good at other subjects, so I wasn't an all rounder, and why I preferred generally to spend time on my own.
Mm, yeah, I can understand how it makes sense to you then. And you told me you started to learn everything about neurodiversity, so it became your special interest.
Yeah, so I I became a little bit obsessed, which is what I do. I came across the term neurodiversity, coined by Judy Singer, obviously back in the 1980s,
Mhm.
and I just started absorbing myself in everything neurodiversity. I was working for a large organization at that time. I connected through the employee reference group, but I didn't just do that. I became the lead in it. I read every article I could possibly find on the topic of neurodiversity. Plus, I started ordering books frantically from Amazon and had them delivered daily. To the point that my family were this is getting ridiculous. You've got every book on neurodiversity known to man. Um, and I really did become an expert in the topic. I wanted to know. I had this thirst for knowledge. I just really wanted to know everything about who I was, who my daughter was, who I guess like everything that we could possibly have encountered to date, and also what we could encounter in the future. I wanted to understand how I was different from other autistic people, or whether I was the same as some autistic people, and what the nuance was. And I just totally, to the point that I excluded everything else. I stopped reading every other topic that I knew about. I stopped all the other things that I really enjoy, and that's all I did for about 6 months, I would say.
Mm-hmm. You already touched on some of the problems that you experience every day in day-to-day life, but could you just mention to us what limitations you experience that are part of the autism, or that you think is part of the autism?
So I guess the main thing is just needing to practice, needing to rehearse, and not being able to be socially spontaneous. So and when I talk about social aspects, I don't just mean having fun and going out with friends. I mean everything that involves communication. So like I would sort of I would be up all night rehearsing conversations over and over in my head. I would overthink every communication that I had. Did I say it in the right way? Was the tone correct? Did I get my point across? Was I also didn't understand when people were unfair. So I had a really strong sense of fairness, and so I couldn't overlook things. So one of the challenges I used to get was I used to quite often get feedback like, you're too direct. It's not that black and white. You can't see everything in that way. It's like there's nuance, and it's not that we're not fair. It's just that, you know, we have to take into account other aspects which you don't seem to understand. So I guess it was those gaps in my understanding that made me different from a neurotypical person in the way that they would operate. So it was things like that. Then it was also things like I'm incredibly clumsy, really uncoordinated. You know, I get very, very overwhelmed when there's lots of noise around me, and I feel quite vulnerable in those situations. It also has made me quite hyper vigilant. So it makes it very difficult for me to be out and about and doing things, because I just sort of, I find myself just kind of being really jumpy and edgy, and I suffer a lot from social anxiety. So if I go out, I can go out and I can socialize on my own terms, but then for days afterwards I will be completely wiped out. You know, so I can only do that every now and then, because then I need 3 or 4 days to recover.
Mm.
And I guess those are the main areas that it sort of affects me.
Yeah, okay. And I'm sure over time in your life you found strategies to limit the impact, or you found tools that you invented yourself to protect yourself, or to help with these limitations. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's mainly, I guess, around sort of routine, making sure I can control my environment. But it's not always like a protective barrier in terms of safety. Sometimes it can just be like doing things independently so that I don't have to rely on other people, because like I hate being late, for example, because it usually means I have to walk into rooms when people are already in conversation, and then I have to try and join conversation. So I'll go to great lengths to make sure that I actually turn up places really, really early, so that I can be the first one in the room and I can control that environment. Then, you know, there's things about routines, mornings, to avoid meltdowns and things like I have a specific soap or shampoo that I've been buying for years, and if I can't get hold of that particular shampoo, or if they put it in a different place in the supermarket, then, you know, those kind of things will quite easily cause me to have meltdowns, and that can be embarrassing at 51. So I tend to do things that stop that happening.
Mm-hmm. Can you think of other things, maybe? Routines, you said.
Other things that I do, I guess, I mean, my morning routine is really specific, and to the point that sometimes I guess I don't, it's not even logical to people. So it's not even like getting ready. Like I have a specific game on my phone that that I play for half an hour. I do it rigidly for 30 minutes every morning after I've had my breakfast. And I don't really know why I do it. I don't really, it seems like a waste of time when I actually think about it. But it's just become part of what I do, and I do that, and then I feel better about the day, you know. But as I said, if that kind of thing goes wrong, like if I don't have time to do that because I've got to go somewhere else, then my day doesn't feel quite right. I mean, that kind of thing doesn't necessarily send me into meltdown, but it can affect the way my brain works, because I feel that that kind of like that gets my brain in the right mode, and then everything else kind of like goes right after that. But I things like my hair, I'm really funny about my hair. I have real big sensory issues, so my hair can't sit on my neck because that irritates me. I used to wear scarves for a long time when I had long hair, because I can have the feeling of hair touching my neck, so I would always wear scarves and things. So I guess it's things like that that I do to sort of control and make sure that I don't go into meltdown, or I don't like have those moments where sometimes what I do can look embarrassing to me, at least.
Yeah, I can
But I
understand.
also do have stimming things as well. You know, I can rub my arm a lot. That's my kind of comfort thing, I suppose. I do this a lot. That's my sort of stimming thing. Sometimes I scratch the back of my head. Um, lots of things I do to sort of like try and control my sensory environment.
Mhm. Yeah, that was a very comprehensive list of things. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I thank you for the interview. We can come to an end. Is there anything you'd like to say to other autistic women or somebody listening today?
I think that, for a long time in my life, before I knew that I was autistic, I knew that I wasn't like everybody else. I knew that I had a different approach to life. I knew that I thought differently, but I spent a lot of my life trying to pretend to be like what I thought I should be. And that involved the rehearsing conversations and planning things ahead of time, but it also involved trying to understand when to laugh at jokes, for example, or trying to pretend that I understood, um, I suppose, like idioms and things like that, those sort of language that neurotypical people use. Um, and it was exhausting. It was really exhausting. And I think once I decided that, or once I found out that I was on the spectrum, I think then I decided to just demask. And I'm not even sure it was an intentional thing. I didn't decide one day that I was just going to be authentically me. But I think once I'd sort of made that discovery and my brain had switched over, I found it really hard to go back. And so I've spent a lot of my time trying to prove why I need to be authentic. So I would say to people, trust your own instincts, be who you are, no matter how uncomfortable it makes other people, because probably you spent most of your life being uncomfortable on their behalf. So it's about time that people accepted you for who you are. And you should, it's authenticity and personal integrity is really important to me. And now I am myself 95% of the time. I would say there are times when I still do put on a mask, but it's less often, and I feel more comfortable as a result. So I would say just be authentically you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very valuable advice that you gave.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thank you, Lucy, for today and for the interview. And
Thank you.
yeah,
It's been good talking to you.
Yes, I say the same, and thank you for contributing in this interview series. We have a lot more coming and a lot already done. Thanks to the UK and have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye.
Bye everyone.